Hi readers, welcome back to my channel, Lila Wanders and Reads, Lee here, and it is time for the June reading recap. And I read so many books in June, I can hardly believe it. There were a few that were a little shorter, but I had to make two stacks, or a stack and a half. So I'd love to hear what you read in June. June was Pride Month. I tried to pepper some Pride books throughout this month, and I think I was successful. But let's get to it. So I started the month. I needed something light, rom-com-y. This wasn't a lot of commy, but it's Abby Jiminez's Just for the Summer. This was the first book that I have read by Abby Jiminez. I do have another one of her books somewhere, and I'm not sure when I will get to this. I did enjoy this, but Emma in this book had some trauma that I really wasn't expecting, and so it kind of took me by surprise, her dealing with that trauma, and I think it was not as light as I wanted to. But you know what? Lesson learned, because the last book I read, second to last book of the month, also had some grief and loss in there, and so maybe I just need to update my expectations. So the second book that I read was a Pride selection, and that was Bad Girls, a novel by Camila Sosa Villada. I guess that's how you pronounce her name. I enjoyed this book. It was harder to read, but it was very moving. I do feel that some things got lost in translation, because in some places it would be so lyrical, and then I would feel like I was missing something. So I think that there was, I think when I did a post about this, a short about this, I said if I had one wish, it would be that I could read and understand in every major language in the world. And then I think I would have gotten a lot more out of this. As it was, this was a really good read. It is about trans women in Cordoba, Argentina, and I really loved the part about the headless men in here, because that I did understand, and maybe that's because something that was kind of relatable. Anywho, I won't say any more about this. I do recommend it, but it is not an easy read. So after that, I did go into what I thought would be an easy read, but this book also kind of made me think about how I feel about male writers who write male-female romances. I've yet to read any that I remember that really pull me in. This, I just could not relate to it. Maybe because it was from the male point of view. I don't know. But that was Colton Gentry's third act by Jeff Zentner. I've never read anything by Zentner before. I would not rule him out in the future. There were some really okay. There's one thing I really loved about this, and I'll go ahead and spoil this. So, Colton is down on his luck. He's a recovering alcoholic, former country music star, who says something bad about guns, so naturally he gets kicked out of Nashville. He goes home, tries to make it, rebuild his life, and he gets a dog. And I'm like, oh, shit. But then, so there's this part, I love you, Petey. That's the dog. Colton murmurs into the crown of Petey's head, the rest of your life is going to be good, I promise. And then there's a footnote. And I was like, a footnote in a fiction novel? And it says, Petey will not die in this book. So, as someone who does get traumatized when animals die in books, I really appreciated that. So it could have been just me. It could have been coming off of Bad Girls, which was a heavy read. I needed something different. from this. So, like I said, I wouldn't rule out reading Jeff Zentner again. I'm not saying that men can't write romance. I'm saying it made me think that. And again, it could be just because it came off the, coming off a heavy book, I wasn't ready for something kind of mid, not light. But I did read a light book next, and that was Love at 350 by Lisa Peers. I adored this book. This is probably what I should have read right after Bad Girls, because this was very light. It's about a reality TV show, which I love, especially a cooking one, and this is the American Bakerama competition, and one of the contestants kind of gets a crush on one of the judges, and so that's a big no-no. But this is really like a cozy romance, because there's no sex in here. There's just kind of flirtation, and then a lot about the baking show. There's some backstabbing, not between the two love interests, and then it just ends on a kiss and a promise. So this was very light, probably what I needed to read right after Bad Girls. Had I reversed the order and then went into Colton Gentry next, I might have appreciated that a lot more, since I had something to really kind of lighten it up. This year, I've been reading a lot of Kristin Hannah. Again, I only try to read one of her books a month. I've got to keep them separate. I can't binge an author or a genre. Otherwise, I get burnout. So this was a selection I picked up when I went out of town at the beginning of the month, and that is Summer Island by Kristin Hannah. No shit, right? This was good. It was a little medium heavy, is what I'll say it was. I think I like some of her more recent stuff better. This one was published in, well, let me get there, in 2001, so over 20 years ago. But I can see with her writing how it's progressed. So the Women that I read at the beginning of the year was fantastic. This is good. This is a good read. Would I read it again years from now when I've forgotten about it? Yes, 100%. She is getting to be like Nora Roberts, but not quite at that level yet for me. Okay. So the next one was a little bit of a disappointment. I did a short about it. I don't remember exactly what I said. This was a YA novel. I don't think I picked up on that fact when I bought it, but here's what I'll say. It left me hanging at the end, and it had this, so at the ending there's a betrayal. And there's one part, and then you get to see what happened on the other side of it. But I feel like another chapter to wrap everything up would have been appropriate. So this is told from two different perspectives. But also, throughout the book, there's another more modern, like occurring in the present day, perspective from each, both Haruko and Margot. And at the end, I feel like they should have wrapped it up so we figured out how they ended up, because clearly someone is getting their story, someone off the page is getting their story, but they don't wrap it up. And so that was really, this one kind of made me feel down because I was not happy with the ending. And overall, this is not one I would read again. I'm going to decide whether or not I keep it or not in the coming weeks. I don't think it's going to be a keeper, and that makes me sad. Because I was sad about that, I needed to go for a Christmas book. And I don't know where I heard about this book, but this was A Wish for Christmas by Courtney Cole. This was very, very Hallmark movie. But, again, I thought there was one element that didn't quite get tied up. And I don't mind, like, a shocking ending, or I don't mind a twist, or even a bad ending. But there's just, in a Hallmark movie book, this is not published by Hallmark, but in a book that's like a Hallmark movie, you want everything to be wrapped up at the end. That said, I did get total Christmassy vibes, and because of this, and because of some other reasons, I'm going to be doing a bit of Christmas in July reading for July's reading. I'll post about that next week. Anyway, enjoyed the book. I got 2 other books that she wrote, so that I plan to read next month. So even though everything wasn't wrapped up quite as tightly as I like, I still really had a good time with this. Rebecca Serle, I've read a couple of her books now. This is the 3rd one, and that is Expiration Dates. She has a way of adding something that's a little bittersweet in this. I really enjoyed this. I felt like I knew who the one should be really early on, and I was right. But there was also a huge twist in this that I did not see coming. There was a little bitty, like niggling in the back of your mind when something would happen, and you're like, But then you find out what it is, and it's like, holy shit, and it changes everything. She's an auto-buy for me right now, and this book did not change that. Great read. I think I gave it 3 or 4 stars. I don't remember, but I really did like it. I like her writing style. I like that she keeps secrets from us, and I'm always satisfied at the end. And I was with this one. Next up was Love at 350 was a Pride Month selection. I need to keep remembering to tell you about that. The next up was another Pride Month selection, also a Christmas book. I really should have waited to read this until Christmas for July, but I had such a great time with it. That was Kiss Her Once for Me by Alison Cochrun. And again, I loved it. Very Christmassy, very kind of while you were sleeping-y, in that the main character, Ellie, fake dates the son of this family. She goes to Christmas with this family, or spends the week before Christmas with this family, and she falls in love with the family. She's also actually in love with a one-night stand she had from the year before. Very complicated. But, so there are a lot of misunderstandings and not talking. This is my second Alison Cochrun. I love her. I will buy her work at Auto-Buy. But again, this was so fun. It made me feel like it was snowing outside. And it gave me that Christmas feel. Should have waited for Christmas, or Christmas in July, but I didn't. And I'm glad that I didn't, because this is the point right here where my reading month changed. I had a really kind of rough go of it, even though I read some good books. I just felt like it was just really rough. And once I hit this, everything just changed. So the next book, also great, was The Villa by Rachel Hawkins. She also wrote, I think it's called The Heiress, set in North Carolina. This one is set in, I think it starts out in North Carolina, but it ends up in Italy. And it's set in 2 timelines. There's a twist at the end. It hit all the right notes for me. I will buy more Rachel Hawkins. So while I was reading that book, clunk, I had taken a week off to clean off my back porch and also to get some books shelved, which I'm now going to have to shelve more books. Anywho. So as I was doing that upstairs, I came across this book, Scream for Me by Karen Rose. I was going to do a video review on this, but then I read another book that I absolutely loved and I had to talk about. This is copyright 2008, and here's what I'll say. This was almost 20 years ago, written almost 20 years ago. I felt like there were almost too many characters in here for me to keep up with. And as with any romantic suspense or romance, there's insta-love. But it was almost too insta for me. If your book is going to be 661 pages, maybe give us, more than 100 and some odd pages before the insta-love happens. Anyway. There were also, like, some subplots that really were hard for me to keep track of. All this said, it did not prevent me from buying another Karen Rose book that I found out in the wild when I had, again, gone out of town. There is one thing that I've noticed in some books. I didn't expect to see it in something so modern, if 16 years ago can be considered modern, but still in the 2000s. And that's a habit of infantilizing women. And the male detective does that to the protagonist throughout this book. And it really, really bothers me. Now, the other Karen Rose book I got is more recent. I think it's in the 2020s, but it's at the bottom of this pile, and I kind of want to knock over all the books to get to it. So I'm interested to read that and see if she still does it, because that is a huge turnoff for me. And if that's the case, then I won't read her again, and I'll get rid of both of these books. That said, engaging romantic suspense read. I did enjoy it for the most part. I can look past some things for a good story and a good plot and a good murder, but we'll see how the second book turns out. The next book was also a Pride Month selection that I picked up at an out-of-town trip to a Barnes & Noble. I did not expect to love this the way I did, but I loved it. I think I did a short about this, and I asked, have you ever read a book, and when you finished it, you're like, what the fuck did I just read? Because that is how Sister Maiden Monster made me feel. This is by Lucy A. Snyder, and I absolutely adored it. It's apocalyptic fiction. There's a lot of things that would be trigger warnings for a lot of people, not me. But I totally adored this book. It was so weird and wacky. I do want to share this one part. So this is told from three perspectives: the sister, the maiden, and the monster, I guess. But it really would have... Never mind, I won't spoil. Anyway, so there's this point where this creature appears in front of the second character in the book as something other than human. I was suddenly remembering passages about angels in the Bible. They weren't hot dudes with halos like you see in Renaissance paintings. They always had to tell mortals, fear not, because they were fucking terrifying. So there was that kind of dialogue or narrative throughout. I loved this book. If you are weird and wacky and don't mind some crazy ass shit that is not at all believable, buy this. I mean, it could be believable. You never know what the next pandemic will bring. Hopefully not anything like this. So, again, I'm on a roll right now. I've had 3 great books back to back to back, and it remains throughout the rest of this month. Next up was complete surprise. There is a bug on my wall. It's gonna have to wait. I heard about this from Patreon. I follow Mother Horror, aka Sadie Hartman there, and she did a review of We Used to Live Here by Marcus Kliewer. And she says this book actually scared her. She had to read it during the daytime. I've come now to accept that I'm not going to find any horror that scares me, so I'm going to have to look to engage with it in a different way, because I still want to love horror. And I still will read horror. This was so fantastic. I'm speechless. This is the one I did a book review on. I will try to remember to link the description to the review of this in the comments, because I did a much better job of articulating how I felt about this book. I will say, one thing I adored was there was an interactive element to this book. And again, I think I talk about that in my review. Next up, as many of you know, I do follow a guy named Greg at Supposedly Fun on YouTube, and I get a lot of suggestions from what he's reading. And one of the books that he's mentioned a couple of times I can't remember if he said it about this or another book, but it applied to both. And he talked about that the book had a pervasive sense of sadness. And Tin Man by Sarah Winman certainly does. That said, this was a beautiful book. It was, I mean, took my breath away. It was one of those books that makes me feel quiet inside when I'm reading it, because like it slows my brain down. I really just follow into it with my whole heart. And that is the kind of book that this is. Beautiful, beautiful. I think that the back cover in the description was a little bit deceptive, because this part's true. This is almost a love story, but it's not as simple as that. That is 100% true. But there's another thing that I think is a little bit deceptive. That said, this was another Pride Month selection. And I'm so glad that I watched that video of Greg's and I came across this in the Barnes & Noble and bought it, because I don't regret it. This is a keeper for sure. Alright, still in Pride Month. I hope if my battery goes out, I'm going to kick this camera. Have you seen this? Let me check. Oh yeah, I've got plenty of battery. Have you seen This Girl by Nita Tyndall? This was another, like I said, Pride Month selection. Loved this. This was a horror, YA horror about missing girls and a serial killer. And yeah, totally recommend it if you like YA and if you like murder. Check this one out. Another Pride Month selection, even though I knew the end, by C.L. Polk. This is like a noir fantasy with, I can't spoil it, but with celestial beings, whatever, I spoiled it. It's angels and devils and demons, and I absolutely adored this book. The ending was so beautiful that I just, like, if this is fantasy noir, this is what I want to read. Like, the noir detective thing, that was sort of in here, but loved it. Reminded me a little bit of the movie Dogma, right at the very end, or towards the middle to end. Okay. On the 6th of June, I started The Longest Day. June 6, 1944. I started it June 6, 2024. And I finally finished it up this week. This was well written. I'm also listening to a book about oral histories of D-Day, so I'm so glad that I read this while I'm listening. It helps me keep track. Loved this book. Great read. If you have any interest in World War II, if you know somebody who participated in D-Day, I highly recommend The Longest Day. It talks about it from many different perspectives, from the American side to the British to the Germans. Well worth the read. Alright, 2 books left. And my camera's being weird because I don't know. Next up, I read a novel love story by Ashley Poston. I've read other books, The Dead Romantics and The 7-Year Slip, and I love her. Loved this novel. It was, there was some sadness in here too, kind of similar to the Abby Jiminez. And I think there's one part, I think that I put in, I did. I put this in a short, but I'd be remiss not to say it here. This is one of my favorite paragraphs. And he would never stop missing her, because that was what loss was in the end. Breaking a piece off of yourself that you'd never get back. There were people who tried to fill that hole with work, and there were people like me who tried to fill it with stories. People filled it with whatever could fit. So I thought that was beautiful. This is about loss. It's about love. And it tied everything up for me at the end. Ashley Poston is another auto buy for me. And finally, I don't even remember how many books that is, because it's a lot. It's like over 16, I believe. My last book of June is The Stepford Wives by Ira Levin. I've just started this, but it is only 123 pages, so I will finish it today. I've been taking breaks throughout the day as I do chores and reading, 5 minutes or so, and it's going really quickly. I watched the movie yesterday, the original movie. I'm already liking the book better because it can convey things with words that they can't do on the big screen. Anywho, that was June. It started a little rough, but ended up being a great reading month. I can't wait to finish this one up and then start with Christmas in July, I guess. I'd love to hear what you read in June. What are your reading goals for July, or do you have any? Anywho, keep the comments coming. I did say I was going to do, a review description. In the description box, I will put a link to my review on We Used to Live Here. Loved it. That's it for me. I will be back next week with my Christmas in July possibility pile. Happy reading!